Good evening. How are
Hi,
you?
Stan. How are you?
Good to see you.
Likewise. I was talking to a friend of mine. I think we're both getting ready to retire, probably.
Wow.
And, oh, hi, Ellen. Anyway, I'll be in touch with you because maybe you can help me. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. So if my math is right, it's about 45 minutes, right? No.
Math is right.
Yeah. Well,
That's how I did math too.
what's that?
Um,
Mid calculations,
yeah, I think we were. It's the first time we weren't exact as we were going to be, exactly 45 or close.
I see.
But let's give it 1 minute for 2 minutes.
Yeah. I think we'll give it. Okay. Everybody's supposed to just do their own math.
Yeah, I think people are pretty good at counting.
I think people can do that. If we can learn Gemara, we can count 45 minutes up.
If you learn Eruvin, you can count.
If we can figure out what's a chutzner, and what's a mechitza, we can do the 45 minutes. I think so.
I agree.
Okay. Let's see. Hold on a second. Okay. So according to Rabbi Linzer, there's like some people would say the last chapter, parak of the Masechet doesn't really belong here.
Tosfot says that, yeah.
Tosfot says that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many other people say it too, but yeah, it's. I mean, as you probably saw on Friday, and we'll go over some of it, or Thursday we started it, right?
Right.
And it really is a whole discussion about carrying on Shabbos, right? Which really very much seems to be like the first parak in the Masechet Shabbat, right? So one interpretation, which is not what Tosfot says, is that, if you think of Shabbat and Eruvin as one long Masechet,
right?
This is like your opening and closing with the same, kind of thing. It's stylistic. It's not really. Yeah. Tosfos has a very loose answer. He said, we mentioned something last week or whatever that, it's like, it was like a stream of consciousness almost. I mean, you mentioned something last parak, it was similar, we just stuck it on here. It's not a very convincing answer.
Right. Well, where else would it go if they had this?
Right. It's another question, but I think that we're going to see. I mean, obviously in this whole parak, a lot of review of things we've done in Shabbat, which is good.
So it could have gone in Shabbat, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's where it should have been.
Yeah.
We're going to see today. I guess we'll get started. I don't know where everyone else is. Maybe they have different 45 minutes. But that the final part of the Mishnah. So if you recall, now Miriam's here. We can start. Okay. So the Mishnah said,
we were discussing whether people could figure out 45 minutes after,
it's really difficult.
But we decided
22, which was not. I'm kidding.
But we could do the Gemara. We could figure out the 45 minutes.
Right.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So where today's daf is daf Tzadi Zayin. Now we can get started. Top of Tzadi Zayin. I think he said he got to the 2 dots. I think he got to the 2 dots. Anyways, our Mishnah was right. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Our Mishnah was talking about if you find tefillin outside on Shabbat, you don't want to leave them there. They could get stolen. They could get ruined. But you're not allowed to carry on Shabbat, right? So again, this is the question. It's really a Shabbat question. And we saw at the end of the Mishnah there was a case about taking it from one barrel to another barrel. We said, and you can do it as long as even if you take it outside of the tchum. And then Rabbi Yehuda said, no, you can't do it. I'm sorry, that was the Rabbi Yehuda. And then we said, Amru Lo, you can't take it outside of the tchum. So that's what Tosfos says. It has to do with Eruvin, because the end of the Mishnah talks about tchum. But either way, the beginning of the Mishnah clearly doesn't. It's talking about just carrying. And the Mishnah got into this side point where it talked about if you find tefillin, you're allowed to carry them in some way. And we had a whole discussion about you can wear them. Is Shabbos man tefillin? Is it Bal Tosef? Is it a decoration, etc.? But yesterday we talked about the question of whether they're new or they're old, right? So the Mishnah said you can only take a tefillin if they're old, if they're tested. But if they're new, then you can't. And we thought yesterday, though we changed our mind, that might be because New ones might not be tefillin at all, right? It might just be where you wrote this cloth, the parsha of tefillin, because it's a good luck charm. And so you have a kamiyah, right? And so it might not be tefillin. And if it's not truly tefillin, it doesn't have the kedusha of tefillin. And we wouldn't permit any of these things. You can't wear it on Shabbos. You can't carry it in these ways because it's just amulet, right? It's nothing kadosh. It came out yesterday that that's probably not the case. And the question was, well,
Why do you say that?
I'm sorry.
Why do you say that we came out yesterday that it's not the case?
So maybe because I learned today's daf already. Sorry. So let me read today's daf.
Are we assuming there's the problem is that
I give that to you, David. I have to remember where I was up to, where the Gemara says it. Sorry, keep
I
going.
think the problem is that if they were an Eruv, you could do it, or if it's muksa, or what's the is it a muksa problem or is it a
Eruv.
It's a carrying problem.
So if there were an Eruv, they found him in the chutzner and the chutzner was part of the Eruv, you could do it?
Correct. You can move them for that
So we're
purpose.
assuming no Eruv.
Correct. You're an outsider. You're Shutta Rabim. We're assuming a real problem.
Oh, we're in the Rosh Hashanah. Okay.
So it says the Gemara now, the two dots. David, I'm sorry, I was a little ahead of myself. Hashta de Tani Avua de Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Now that we learned the following in the name of Avua de Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, that says, Elohein Yishanot. What are tefillin that are yishonot, which again literally means old ones, which are tested ones? That means, says the Braita, kol sheyesh ben mitzuot u'mikusharot. They have straps, right? So not just the tefillin itself, but they have the straps around them, and they are knotted in the way that tefillin are supposed to be knotted, showing the different letters that make up God's name. Chadashot, says the Braita, that's where the yesh behem ritzuot v'lo mikusharot. That's where they have straps, but the straps are not tied in the way to make the letter that is Hashem's name. Remember, tefillin have to be wrapped around you when you wear them. But before you even wrap them around you, we have certain knots in the tefillin that spell out the letters of Hashem, right? Shin, Dalet, and will be eventually the Yud. So says the Gemara, once we learned that in the Braita, which I guess I was ahead of myself, the Kuli Alma, now we would say that everybody agrees, meaning everybody in the Mishnah, that lo tarach inish, that nobody is going to make tircha to write a kamiyah of tefillin if they didn't want it for the tefillin. So that in fact the issue has nothing to do with kamiyah. If you see a written tefillin, we assume now, this is how we say according to this Braita, that you would assume it's written for tefillin, right? Because no one's going to put all the effort in to write that whole thing if it wasn't for tefillin. The question here is whether it's tied or not tied. So it's nothing to do with old and new in the sense of tefillin or not tefillin. The question is to do with usable or not usable, right? So if it's mikusharot, then you can carry it. You can wear it. You don't carry it. You wear it. If it's not mikusharot, then you can't wear it because it's not kosher as tefillin. Says the Gemara, well, why is that a problem? Why can't you just learn vinu mi'anev? Why can't you just you can't tie a knot on Shabbos, but why can't you just sort of wrap it together? Anev means to braid it. Right? Why can't you just lay one strap over the other in the right format in a way that's not tying a knot? So Amar Rav Chisda, well, says Rav Chisda, Zoto Merit, Aniva Psula B'Tfilin. In fact, this is what they meant when they said that Aniva is not sufficient for tefillin. In order for tefillin to be kosher, they have to be tied. They can't just be braided together. It has to be a formal knot. And you can't do that on Shabbos, and therefore you can't carry them. You can't wear them. Abaya says, Abaya Amar, that no, this is Rav Yehuda l'tameh. This, in fact, is Rav Yehuda l'shitato. Rav Yehuda said, Amar aniva kshira mal yatahi. Rav Yehuda is of the opinion that aniva on Shabbat is the same as a kshira. And so maybe aniva would be okay for tefillin, maybe braiding something without knotting it would be okay. But Rav Yehuda is of the opinion that if you braid something in a way that it stays together, then that itself is considered to be a kshira, not on Shabbos, and you'd be over, and therefore there's no way to make these new tefillin into usable tefillin. And that's why you can't wear them. Says the Gemara, okay, if that's the case, then according to Abaya, Taima da'aniva kshira mayati. So the reason Rabbi Yehuda says you can't carry them or wear them is because you can't knot them. You can't do a braid because it's like a kshira. Halav hachi, if that had not been the case, meaning if it wasn't Shabbos or if Rabbi Yehuda didn't hold that you couldn't do this aniva, so then maybe anivlu, then you should braid them together. How could that be enough? Well, Amr Rav Yehuda, braider of Shmuel bar Shilat, Mishmei the Rav Yehuda, in the son of Shmuel bar Shilat, said in the name of Rav that kesher shel tefillin halacha Moshe misinayu, right? Reb Yehuda, in the name of Yehuda, sorry, the son of Reb Shmuel Bar Shilat, in the name of Rav said the Kesher Shel Tefillin, the requirement to have tefillin knotted a certain way is not a suggestion. It's halacha Moshe Sinai. It's absolutely required. Tefillin are not kosher. The Amr of Nachman v'navin on the bar, right? And it has to be on facing outwards, which we say is just an addition to that case, meaning you have to have the knot where you can see it, not inwards, not below the tefillin, but in a way that's exposed. So how could Rabbi Yehuda say that you could do an aniva, right? How could Abaya explain? Now the reason Rabbi Yehuda says this is prohibited on Shabbat is because you can't do a weave, right? Because you're not allowed to weave on Shabbat, but how could that be kosher? If the requirement to knot a tefillin is halacha Moshe Sinai, you can't, it's not a kosher tefillin unless you do that. Says well, it just means that you could be the unavlahu ke'en kshira too. You can weave it, you can fold over the straps in a way that looks like our kesher, meaning you could still make the shin that we make and the yud that we make, right? Those are the things we make. You can still make those shapes in without necessarily tying it, except of course that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that doing that, a niva is just like a kshira and it would be prohibited on Shabbat. And so it comes out according to that. Then in fact, the machloket in our Mishnah about carrying old tefillin or new tefillin, right? So old tefillin are okay, they're kosher tefillin. You put them on and you wear them. New tefillin, it depends. According to the Tanna Kama, new tefillin are okay, even though they're not tied, because you can tie them, we're not going to say tie them, but you can do an aniva on Shabbat to put them together. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot because that's prohibited on Shabbat, and therefore these are not functional tefillin. And if they're not functional tefillin and you put them on and wear them like tefillin, of course, you're obviously not wearing them in the proper way, and then it's considered to be carrying on Shabbat. And so you can't do it.
So this is saying the only way you could carry it is to put it on.
Correct. Our Mishnah said.
You couldn't just carry them in your hand or something.
Correct. Right. So sorry, the Mishnah is very clear. Well, the Mishnah is not so clear, but the Mishnah meant that. Yes, you can wear them pair at a time, meaning you have to wear one pair. We had a machloket, you could wear two pairs at a time.
Right.
We talked later in the Mishnah about whether you could carry them and pass them to the next person. That's not wearing them. Right?
No,
That's
just like put them in your pocket or something. Forget
putting
it.
your pockets out of the question. You
Out of
can't
the
do it.
Okay, and when you say you can carry it, talking about somebody who's obligated in tefillin or like a katan or a
Someone who's obligated in tefillin. And that was where we had the discussion yesterday and 2 days ago about machine, right? So,
Okay, right.
and the Breita added women, and so in the Breita added women, we had a very long
Right. Okay.
discussion about that. Amar Chista Amar Rav. Now continues the Gemara while we're on a little sidetrack of tefillin, like we're back in Menachot now, right? It said Rav Chista Amar Rav, Halokeach tefillin mimisha eno mumcha. If you buy tefillin from someone who's not an expert in writing tefillin, right? You go to I don't know how to say it nicely, right? But you go to someone who's not an expert. So Tosfot does point out that we talked in Menachot about this, that it was a very bad idea to buy tefillin from someone who's not an expert. And Tosfot understands here that lechatchila you're not allowed to do this. We're only saying if, let's say you did, let's say b'di avad, you either there was no one else available or you did it, right? And the reason, of course, that we don't want you to do it, Tosfot explains, is that in order to check tefillin, you have to take them apart, right? And that does damage to them. So it's not. You ideally want to buy your tefillin in a situation which doesn't require you to manipulate them a lot, right? Unlike a mezuzah, which we don't care, you could just check it. So if you let's say you bought them from someone who's not an expert. So your question is, are these good tefillin or not? So what do? So says Rav Chista Amar Rav, let's say you bought a bundle of tefillin, right? You bought 5 pairs, right, from someone. So you go to someone's house and you buy a bunch of tefillin from them. So says the Rav Chista Amar Rav, bodek shtayim shel yad v'achat shel rosh. What you do is you take, 2 of the tefillin, presumably at random, right, or whatever, two of the tefillin shel yad, and 1 of the rosh, and you open them up and you check them and make sure they're written properly and they're measured properly. Probably written is the main focus here, right? So you make sure they're written properly. Oh, or you could take shtayim shel rosh v'achat shel yad, or you take 2 shel rosh and 1 shel yad. But basically, you should check 3 of them and make sure it's okay. And this is pretty similar to what we always say, right? 3 is a chazakah. You check 3, and if those 3 are okay, then presumably this person knows how to write tefillin, and it's okay. Says the Gemara, 1 second. I don't understand who you're buying these from. Manavsha. What are we talking about, right? Imichad gavr kazavin. If you buy them all from one person, and presumably meaning one person who bought them from someone else, but if there's one source of these tefillin, they all come from the same place. So then all you need to do is check 3 of them. So livdok, o shalosh shel yad, o shalosh shel rosh. Why do you need 2 and 1? Like, why do we care if you check shel yad and shel rosh? If the whole issue is the person selling it to you, right? Are they reliable or not? You just have to establish that they're reliable 3 times. So check 3 shel rosh or 3 shel yad. Clearly, you made a big emphasis of checking both some shel rosh and some shel yad. Why? And if the issue is that you bought it mitrei tlata gavri zavin, if you bought it from multiple people, and the question is that, it's not he's a wholesaler, right? He got these from many sources, so it's not all from one person. So then I understand how it helps to do 2 shel yad and 1 shel rosh, right? That doesn't seem to solve any of the problems. Then
Aren't they written differently?
they are not written differently. They're different. They're put in the partial differently.
Right, but they're put together differently.
They're put together differently. But if you're checking the text is the same. It's just they're not. One is 4 and 1 is 1, but the same text is right. And if you buy it, but James, just to that point, that's not necessarily an issue, right? Because if you trust the person writes well and you establish it in 3 different times, it may not matter. It's not a question of how well do they. I mean, again, this is not the issue that we're discussing. But I'm not saying, there are differences between shel rosh and shel yad, but it could be you're trying to establish, does the person who's writing this know how to write?
But they might have put like the wrong partial, the wrong order in the
Correct.
shel rosh.
It could be, and that you won't know if you just did one. It's true. But as the Gemara, imi trade tlata gavri zavin, if you bought this from many people, or and Rashi explains that sort of that the person you bought it from got it from many people, then kol chad v'chad by bedika, then each one should need bedika, right? You can only establish that sofer A and sofer B and sofer C is a good sofer by having proof that basically that person wrote properly 3 times. So it doesn't help to do 3 random ones or 2 shel yad and 1 shel rosh. So how do you understand explain this? Says the Gemara, the Olam, you're right. Michad gavra zavin, you're talking about where you bought it from one person, and what you need, ubainan de mitmachi b'shel yad b'shel rosh. James just said exactly. You need to establish that this person has experience in writing both shel yad b'shel rosh on one hand, right? On the other hand, you don't need to say 3 shel yad and 3 shel rosh. So it's a hybrid, basically. We're trying to prove that this person's a good sofer. He or she wrote 3 times properly. And you're also trying to establish that that person understands how to write the shel yad and shel rosh, which is a big chiddush, right? Because if you need both, why do you need 3 of both? But that's what Rav Chisda El Merav is saying, is that you don't need 3 of each. You just need 3 total, but it has to be both types. Says the Gemara, okay, but Aini, we have another statement which seems to contradict that. Aini, is this true? But Tani Rabba Bar Shmuel, bit tefillin, that he said in tefillin, when you're talking about tefillin, bodek shalosh shel yad v'shel rosh, you check 3 shel yad v'shel rosh. Now, what does that mean? 3 shel yad v'shel rosh. My love, o shalosh shel yad, o shalosh shel rosh. So we understood that this means, or we think it might mean, you check 3 pairs, well, not 3 pairs, 3 individuals, three tefillin, right? Either shel yad or shel rosh. It doesn't matter, which contradicts what Rav Chisda Merav said, which is you need to check both types.
Isn't there a word that is what's the singular of tefillin? There is a word.
Tefillah, I guess.
I heard the word one time.
Okay. Says my note, what that brighter would mean, according to Rav Chisda Merav, is you should check shalosh, but it has to be both. Some of them that you check have to be shel yad, and some have to be shel rosh. Meaning you can't exclusively just check shel yad or just check shel rosh, which is exactly what Rav Chisda Merav said. So what it means is shalosh, you check 3, mehen shel yad, mehen shel rosh. Some of them are shel yad and some of them are shel rosh. So okay, that's a great explanation. But there's another bright that Rav Kahana taught. Latani Rav Kahana bit tefillin bodek shnayim shel yad v'shel rosh. 2. How do you explain that? Says the Gemara. Well, I can understand. That would mean. Hamani Rebbe, that's another bright, and it's going according to Rebbe. If you recall, Rebbe consistently is of the opinion, not always, but consistently is of the opinion that you only need to do something 2 times to establish a chazakah. You don't need this whole 3 rule. Is not Rebbe holds you only need 2. And the Amar, as Rebbe said, betrayzim you have a chazakah. In 2 times you have a chazakah, and so therefore that bright means you have to check 2 shel yad v'shel rosh, meaning as Rav Chisda Merav said, or similar to Rav Chisda Merav said. 1 should be shel yad, 1 should be shel rosh, because we want to establish that the person has experience in both. But you only need to do 2 in order to establish a chazakah. You Rebbe, aim a sefer. Look at the end of the bright, which we didn't quote yet. The Braita says, the Chaim B'Tsevet Hasheni, and you need to do the same thing with the second bundle. The Chaim B'Tsevet Hashlishi, and you do the same thing with the third bundle. Okay? Now we assume that this means you go to a guy and you say, you go to a wholesaler, you go to the shuk, and they've got a sack of tefillin, right? You take out the sack, you don't know how kosher they are, you check 2 or 3, they're okay, the sack is okay, right? Like they do in the supermarket, kosher, right? You check a bunch of lettuce, you go check the next pallet, right? If that's what you do, right? So you check a sack of tefillin, then says the Braita, there's a Tsevet Hasheni, you check a second sack, you check a third sack. We think what that means is that once you check 3 sacks, you don't have to check any more sacks, right? Because the source is a good source. So you not only have a chazakah on the container itself, but you have a chazakah on the 3 containers in a row. And if that's what it means, how could you say it's Rebbe, right? Because Rebbe again says you only need 2 for a chazakah. Why do you need the third? Why do you need Sevet Sheni, Sevet Shlishi? Says the Gemara, you misunderstood it. The Rebbe, Shlishi Mi'itlei. Does Rebbe doesn't hold you need a third one? Moder says the Gemara, no, because Rebbe says that you have a chazakah with 2, but that's only when you have something consistent between them. But Moda, Rebbe b'tzvatim, Dimitrei tlata gavri zavin. Rebbe would admit that when you're talking about different sacks, that you cannot establish a chazakah just by checking 2 of those sacks, because it's possible or likely that he acquired them, that the wholesaler acquired them from many people. Well, if that's the case, why is 3 enough, right? If there could be more than 3 sellers or more, then why do you establish chazakah from 3 if you don't have any confidence that the same person sold all the things in the 3? Says, you're right. I take it all back. That's exactly what it means. You misunderstood this. So it doesn't mean that if you check a second sack and a third sack, that now you don't have to check any more of them. According to everyone, you have to keep checking. It just means, according to Rebbe, you only have to check 2 in each sack, and according to the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Yehuda, you have to check 3. Says Gemara, well, I didn't say that. I did Tani Shlishi. The reason we said 2 and 3 is that Fuki Mechizkiah, it's to exclude the opinion of Chizkiah, who holds that in general 2 is enough for a chazakah. So what Rabbi Akiva, what we're saying now, according to this opinion, is that that in this case, the machloket is this enough for a chazakah? There is an opinion, an extreme opinion in this case of Chizkiah, who says you can just, even though they're bought from different people, I guess the fact that there's a lot of use here. The fact that the person we're talking about is buying these sacks of tefillin from one wholesaler, all you have to do is establish that the wholesaler is reliable. And all you've got to do to establish that that person is reliable is to check the first 2 sacks that they give you, or 3 if you hold against that, but that's enough. But according to Rebbe, who says a chazakah is done with 2, that's only true if the things that you're evaluating with your chazakah all share a common source. Once you have multiple sacks from multiple people, then you have to check each sack. You have to do the second one, the third one, and it would be true about the 4th and the 5th as well. And he only said 3 to exclude from people who said you only need to check 2. But that's sort of how we come out. And so, I mean, it's a machloket at the end of the day, but Rabbi Chisda Marav's opinion was, and if this happens in real life, I think that's how we paskin, is that you have to check 3, right? They just have to, again, if it's one, assuming it's from one source, you have to check 3 to make a chazakah. And the 3 that you check have to include both at least 1 shel yad, at least 1 shel rosh. So it could be 2 and 1 or 1 and 2, as it was. The Mishnah continued and said, matzan svatim, which is the same word, right? We just had 7, right? You find piles, sacks is how I translated it, o krichot, or you find them bundled, tied together. Says, then the Mishnah said, then it depends, right? Mishnah said you should wait, you should cover them up, right? I think that's what the Mishnah said. If you find these sacks, then you should, a lot of tefillin together, then you should be michasan. Is that right? Somewhere it says that, right? Yeah. Oh, it says machshich aleim. Sorry, you shouldn't cover them. You should stay with them until it gets dark, right? So you can't carry them back, and we'll see why in a second. You should just stay with them until it gets dark after Shabbat to make sure no one damages them or takes them. It says
If you find them Friday night, you should sleep there.
Unfortunately, yes. It's long Shabbos. Maybe you can get someone to come replace you, but we'll see. We'll see why you do that in a second.
It's your responsibility to stay there. You have to stay there, or you can stay there.
I mean, the Mishnah says you should stay there. So I don't know. I don't know if you would say, I mean, if you leave or you over Nisr door, right? But the right thing to do is to stay there and protect them, right? Not to ignore them. My tzvatim and my krichot, what does it mean? What's the difference between tzvatim and krichot? I'm Rav Yehuda, I'm Rav, hein tzvatim, hein krichot, it's the same thing. It just means different bundles. And the difference is tzvatim are zuvi, right? If they're pairs, I'm not sure why it's not zugi, but it's not what it says. Zuvi. Let me just see what the aleph is here. Oh, the Rush says zuzi. Okay. And the Defus of Alunki says zugi, which sounds a little bit more appropriate. But either way, Rashi says it means a pair, meaning they're tied together like in bundles of 2, which would be pretty regular. And krichot is krichin tuva. A kricha is where you have like 10 tefillin tied together, not 2 at a time, not 2 together. But either way, it's the same halacha. There's a bunch together. You should stay with them until it gets dark. Okay. Says the Gemara, machshich alehem. This is what the Mishnah said. You should stay until it gets dark, and then miviyin back to the city. Asking her why. Why do you got to sleep there all Shabbos? Amai lailinu zug. Remember, the Tanakhama said you can wear 1 pair at a time. So put on a pair of tefillin, go home, take them off, go back, put on another pair. Why not do it? Why not bring them in 1 pair at a time? Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yehuda, l'didim mefarshit le'minei da'aba, says Rav Yitzchak, and the son of Rav Yehuda, my father told me that's, of course you should do that. But what our Mishnah means to say is call any situation, shilo machnisan zug. If you calculate the time, right? It's 20-minute walk to town, let's say, whatever. So you can take 1 pair in 45 minutes, right? So you do the math. If you can take them in 1 pair at a time, and you could finish bringing them all in before the day is over, then do it. Machnisin zug, right? You could spend your whole day wearing tefillin, going back and forth. But if if you're not going to finish them anyways, then what's the point of bringing 10 pairs in if you're going to leave 5 pairs behind? So then, since you're leaving them behind, just stay there. Don't put on the tefillin. You're going to stay with them till the end of Shabbat anyways. And so, machshich aleim maybe you should just stay there till Shabbat's over, and then carry them all in when Shabbat is over. Okay? I guess, let me just add to this. Of course, if you can go into town and get 5 other people to come out with you and help you, right, then it probably makes sense to do that. So we're talking about a situation where that wasn't possible, or you lived by yourself in the middle of a village or whatever, or the middle of a field. Anyways, continue the Mishnah. Bisakana, if it was a time of danger, or if there was, I gave it away. If there is danger, then bichasan v'holech. Then don't stay there till after Shabbos and wait with them. Cover them up, take off your shirt maybe, or your hat or whatever, and cover them up and go away, because it's dangerous to stay there. Says the Gemara, Vatanya, either Braita says, ubisakana, molichan pachot mi'arba amot. If you're in danger, what you should do is you should actually carry them, but don't carry them more than 4 amot. So carry the sack, or each one, 3 amot, put it down, pick it up again, carry another 3 amot, put it down, carry which is a way to carry on Shabbat without being over an Isser Doraita, because you're only carrying less than 4 amot. It's going to take you a long time, but that's what you should do if it's sakana, because you can't stay there, right? And you don't have, and I guess you can't wear them, so you have to take the 20 pairs. So you should do it that way. So that seems to argue with our Mishnah. Amar Rav lo kasha. Ha b'sakanat goyim, ha b'sakanat listim. Depends what the sakana is. So Rashi has 2 pshatim here. I'm going to tell you the second one, which he likes. Which you don't have to change the girsa for that. He says sakanat goyim means that's our Mishnah is going where you've been threatened by the goyim that you're not allowed to wear tefillin. And if they see you, they'll kill you or they'll arrest you. And so therefore, that's where our Mishnah says, just leave them there, cover them over, and run. You don't want to be caught with these tefillin on Shabbat because your life is in danger. Sakanat listim is where you live in a place where there's no threat to religion, but there's robbers, right? They want the tefillin. So they're going to take them, they're going to steal them, they're going to try to sell them, or they're going to rob you of your clothing or whatever. And so you don't want to be out there, right? You don't want to stay out in the field because you're afraid they'll catch you. But you don't have to worry about walking with them, right? Well, you have to worry a little bit, but at least you get them closer to home. So you shouldn't leave them out in the field, again, because if you leave them out in the field, they'll be stolen and mivazeh, they'll be ruined by these people. But you can't carry them. You don't have enough time to put them on and wear them, right? You don't have enough. So you carry the bag, less than 4 amot, and keep going home.
If it's a real danger,
Amalei Abaya.
no, if it's a real
Sorry?
danger, why are you worrying about property? I mean, like, isn't your life?
Feeling, right? A bizayon of the feeling.
Why would you even risk, your life for an object? It's kedusha, it's stole.
So what do you mean? You mean if they're gonna, in which case? In both cases?
Any case where there's danger, you if it's a fake nifashot, right? What do you chas ala mamon?
No. So again, the sakanat listim is not danger to your life, right? We're saying just you can protect them, right? You should stay there and protect them, is what the Mishnah said till after Shabbat. That's when it's only listim. But if your life's in danger, then you shouldn't. Okay. Amalei Abaya said Abaya to that.
No, the least in was, no, you should carry it for 4 amos at a time, not staying.
Let me rephrase it. In a sakana, the Mishnah said you do nothing, right? You just cover them, don't stay there. You cover them. If it's the Breita said you carry them less than 4 amot, like David just said. So the way we explain that is that if your life's in danger, then just get out of there, cover them and get out of there, and don't walk slowly, right? If it's listim, then you should take them. Don't leave them there because they'll be stolen. But you should carry them pachot me'arba amot, which is not an Isser Shabbos, right? At least midoraita, and it protects these tefillin. Amalei Abaya asked Abaya. Now remember, there was another opinion in the Mishnah which I haven't mentioned yet, which we're going to get to in a second. So Amalei Abaya now. So Abaya responded and said, "Wait a second. So according to what you just said, the Mishnah is talking about sakanat goyim. The Mishnah is talking about where your life is in danger, and therefore the Mishnah says just cover them and run, right?" Yeah. So then Ema Sefer, how do you answer the next words in the Mishnah? The words say, Rabbi Shimon says, "Notnan lechavero, lechavero." You should pass it on to one person who will pass it on to another person. Remember, we said if you do it that way, no individual is picking it up and putting it down, and so there's no Isser Shabbat. But Kol Shekin, the Av Shamilta, you're going to get everyone killed if you do it that way, right? If the whole point is not to attract attention, that makes no sense. Now, again, there's a whole other girsa in the Gemara, which Rashi quotes as well, which is which is something else. But anyways, that's the way Rashi likes it. Av Shamilta, you're going to get yourself killed. So that's where you're right. Of course, that would be a very terrible idea. In fact, our Mishnah is missing some details. This is the way you should understand our Mishnah. The Tanna Kama says if it's shat sakana, then just leave them. Cover them and leave them. You should add the words to the Mishnah, or at least add the idea, that's where your life is in danger. If you're just worried about robbers who will steal these things and sell them on the black market and destroy them or be mevaza them, then you should be molichan pachot me'arba amot. You should pick up the sack, carry it 3 amot, put it down, carry it again. And that's where Rabbi Shimon says, no. In that case, notan lechavero v'chavero lechavero. You shouldn't do it that way. You should give it to someone else. Ask them Rabbi Micah Miflagi, why would they argue about, what's the debate? Whether it's better on Shabbat when you can't leave it there because someone's going to steal it and you can't wear them because it's too many. What is it better for one individual to carry them 3 amot at a time, or for you to get your whole neighborhood to come out and pass them one person to the other? What's the debate? The Micah Miflagi. Umar Savar, the Tanna Kama, is of the opinion, the unquoted Tanna Kama, but the Tanna Kama is of the opinion that pachot me'arba amot adif. It's better for one individual to carry these tefillin less than 4 amot and at a time. Di amrit notes on the chavero. If you come up with this, you get the whole neighborhood to come out and pass one to the other, then av shamilta the Shabbat. Then you're being more mivazeh Shabbat because more people are involved in a behavior that you're really not supposed to do on Shabbat. So it's better to have just one person involved. Umar Savar, but Rabbi Yehuda holds, notzan the chavero adif. It's better if you do it in the way where you pass it on to other people. If you tell a person to carry it one after another, then zimnin delav adate, there will be times where you just don't pay attention, right? It's very difficult to pay attention to carrot walking 6 feet and not 7 feet, and you're going to come to actually ati letzmiui arba amot rishut rabim. So that's a much more dangerous solution, and we'd rather, although it's not ideal, get more people involved. Where as long as you pass it to somebody else, there's no Isser Shabbat, midoraita, right? Into Akira and Hanacha in Rishut Rabim, and therefore we prefer that.
You can get everybody out there, the women, the kids, everybody can do it, right?
You can get everybody.
Okay, whole
You could do the whole thing. But yes.
right?
What's James' question? Ayin Vav Gimel. Where is that?
Can't hear you, James.
I have it instead of goyim or nochri.
Oh,
I-
Gililim. Sorry.
Odei.
Gililim. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which one's the original. Steinsaltz usually tells us what's the original and what's the censored version. Okay, continues the Mishnah, the Chaim Bino. Mishnah said, if your son is out there and you can't, what do? Your son's stuck in the field. It's Rishut Rabim. How do you bring them in? So the Mishnah said you should pass it from one person to another, right? The Chaim Bino, notno the Chavero, the Chavero the Chavero. Pass your son to your friend to the next friend. Okay, but no one should pick up or put down the child. It says, but no, my boy Hatam, what the heck is a kid doing in the middle of a field out away from your house? The Bebenasha Tana, the obvious case, but she yelled at Imo Bisadeh. He was born there, right? So this woman was pregnant. They were, I don't know, maybe they didn't make it to the hospital on Shabbos, right? And the child was born out in the field. And the Chiddush is, Maya Filu Hein Me'a. Like the Mishnah said, you give it the Afilo Chutz, where the words, Afilo Hein Me'a. Even if there's 100 people. It didn't say that about anything else in the Mishnah. And that's the Chiddush. Even though people handling babies is not good for them, right? I don't know if anyone has seen this. There are some people who don't let other strangers hold their newborn children, right? Even though we assume touching a baby is not a good thing, still, if you got to move the baby on Shabbat, that's the best way to do it. So still, even though it's not ideal, afilu hachi ha'adifa, this is the best way to do it, rather than one individual carrying the child the entire way. Rabbi Yehuda said, now the last case in the Mishnah, which again is why Tosfot says this Mishnah is even here in Eruvin, Rabbi Yehuda says a person can give a barrel to their friend, right? Let's say, you really need another barrel of whiskey, right? And your stuff's all the way out in the fields. So you can't carry it on Shabbat, but you need to have shalosh shudas, right? So you give your chavit to your friend and the friend to the next friend, even, says the Mishnah, afilu chutz l'tchum, even if you leave the tchum. Now remember, the tchum of the liquid, or the barrel, let's say the barrel, right? We generally view objects as being, probably, it's like, we're gonna see it's liquid, James, but it might not be whiskey, it might be water. Okay, probably it was water, but or wine. But anyways, the barrel has the tchum of its owner, presumably, right? We said all objects cannot go on Shabbat more than their owner allows them, more than their owner could when Shabbat started. So our Mishnah said you can take it even outside the tchum. Ask the Gemara, how could that be? Rabbi Yehuda said you can do it outside the tchum. Ask the Gemara, but let's lay Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Mishnah, which says that animals and objects have a tchum like their owner. So why can you carry this barrel outside of the tchum? Amar Reish Lakish mishum Levi Saba. Reish Lakish quoted Levi Saba as saying, it's talking about where you don't actually carry the barrel. What you do is you have 10 people, each one has a barrel, and you pour the liquid, right? From ma'aran is a word we only use by liquids. You pour a liquid from one barrel into the next. So the actual barrel is not going outside of its tchum. The liquid is going outside of the tchum. And Rabbi Yehuda is l'tamei. Damer mayim ein behem mamash. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that water, right, and probably other liquids, but let's just say water, that's all the Gemara says here, is not mamash, meaning it doesn't have its own substance. So that water does not have its own tchum. Only the container has a tchum. Other objects, other foods do, but water does not have mamash. It's none. Where did we say this? We said this where Rabbi Yehuda said a case, poter b'mayim mishem mamash. The case there, it's a long case in Beitza, where we'll get to it in a few months, right? A couple of months. So where the case there is you have a potluck on Yom Tov, okay? And everybody brings something together, right? So I bring the oil and someone else brings the eggs and someone else brings the flour and we make a beautiful cake together. The problem, of course, becomes, as the Gemara talks about there, we all have different tchumim, right? And so it turns out that you made this great cake, but you can't carry it anywhere because my tchum extends, to 232nd Street. Your tchum extends to the other side, south on 232nd, north on 232nd. And now we're sort of stuck because the flour in the cake has, my tchum, and the eggs have your tchum, and the sugar has someone else's tchum. So that's what the Gemara discusses in Beitza, right? And Rabbi Yehuda responds there and says, well, don't worry about the water, because the water in the cake, you don't have to worry about. Rabbi Yehuda poter b'mayim b'mnei she'ein behem mamash, right? Rabbi Yehuda says you don't have to worry about the water because water does not retain its own tchum, okay? Now, so that's how we understand the Mishnah, that the Mishnah was not talking about carrying a barrel from one person to another person outside of its tchum. The Mishnah was saying, Rabbi Yehuda says you can carry from one barrel to another by pouring the water, even though you're outside of the tchum. Now, how do you understand the words of the Mishnah though? The Mishnah said, afilu chutz l'tchum, right? And the Amrulo, they said back, I'm reading now the last line in the Mishnah, they said back to Rabbi Yehuda, lo tahalech zeh yoter miraglei ba'aleh. You shouldn't bring this out more than its owner was able to go. So how would you understand that, right? Where am I? The my lo tahalech zo, when they say this shouldn't go out, implying this is the barrel, it means no. Lo yahalech ma shebezo. The liquid that was in the barrel shouldn't go, yoter miraglei ba'alim, shouldn't go outside of the tchum of the original barrel. Says, well, okay, that's a very interesting answer. Rabbi Yehuda permits this to go outside of the tchum because it's a liquid. But Eimer deshamet le Rabbi Yehuda hechad debelian beisa, right? The case I just told you of Rabbi Yehuda was only because you put the water into the dough, right? So you have cookies at the end of the day. So you don't view the water as being, intact. Hechad deitnu beinayo mishamet le, where the water is literally be'en, meaning it's a barrel of water that you're pouring into another. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say that doesn't have a tchum, that has a tchum. Hashta b'kedera Rabbi Yehuda lo batli beinayo. Rabbi Yehuda already said that if you have a cholent, right, and it's liquid, well, the kedera might be a soup, let's say, that you still count the liquid, right, lo batli, beinayo batli. Rabbi Yehuda said that in a kedera, water is not batel. Certainly if it's water alone, it's not batel. The Tanya, and that's another Breita, where the Breita says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mayim umelech betelin beisa, that water and salt are batel from their own tchum if they're baked into a bread, into a dough, right, on Yom Tov, obviously. But ein betelin b'ketera. But if it's in a liquid pan, right, a soup or a stew, it would not become batel mipnei rotzva, because you have the liquid, you have the rotiv, you have the gravy, right? You have the liquid. So how could you explain our Mishnah? If our Mishnah is talking about a barrel full of water or whiskey, right? It's be'en, so it should have a tchum. Ella says, Gemara, you're right. We have to understand our Mishnah says, Rava, hacha v'chavit shekanta shvita umayim shelo kanu shvita askina. We're talking here about a case where the chavit, the barrel was shovet, right? Shabbos started, the barrel was with its owner, right? Barrels when we get or they don't have to be with them, but the owner had a tchum of 2,000 amot. But the water was not in the barrel when Shabbat started. The water was in a stream rushing by. If you recall, we've discussed earlier in this Masechet that if you have water that's moving when Shabbat starts, there's no tchum for that water, right? Because the water it can't be acquiring shvita if it's moving, right? And therefore you can draw water on Shabbat and you can carry it anywhere you want, as long as you can go to that place, right? You can carry the water anywhere you want. You don't have to worry about the water having a tchum, because the water has no shvita. There's no limit on that water. And here you drew the water on Shabbat and you put it in the barrel, right? But the water had no tchum, askinan. And therefore you're allowed, according to Rabbi Yehuda, to carry this barrel outside of its tchum, the batla chavit the gabi mayim, because as we're going to see in a little bit, the object that you're carrying it in doesn't count, because what matters is what you're carrying inside of it. That's what you care about. And the chavit is batel to the mayim. You could take the chavit wherever you could take the mayim. Keditznan, as we said earlier, this was in Shabbos, right? Hamotzi hachai b'mita. If you carry out a living person who can walk on a bed, right? So remember that there's no prohibition of carrying out a chai because chai nosei atzmo, assuming they can walk, right? If they could be nosei atzmo. If you carry that person out on a bed, then you're patur al mitah. you don't have to worry. So carrying the person's one thing, but you're carrying a bed, it's not a problem because the bed, the bed is subjugated, right, is secondary to the person. And the same thing is true if you're a motzi ochlin pachot mikashir. Remember, you're not allowed to carry out food on Shabbat. The shear depends on the type of food. But let's just say you take out less than that shear. If you take it out in a pan, bikli, then you're patur afal kli. You're patur for carrying the kli. Mipnei shakli tafelo, because the kli is tafel to the food in that case. The same thing as what Rabbi Yehuda is saying here is that you're allowed to carry out, not allowed to carry, that you can pass the barrel from one person to another because the water in the barrel has no shvita and the barrel is secondary to the water and therefore you don't have to worry about it. Matav Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asked the question from the following Braita. The Braita says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, B'shayara, if you are in a shayara, if you recall, a shayara is this group of people who are traveling who camped in a valley, right? A bik'ah is what we said. And we talked many times in this Masechet, we cancel a lot of the rules of Eruv, or we make them easier for a shayara because we understand that these are people traveling, they don't have food, they don't have water, they have to get to places, they need more dispensations, right? So in a shayara, and remember we had a whole discussion on how you classify a shayara, how many people have to be there, etc. But if you have a shayara, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Noten adam chavit l'chavero, l'chavero, l'chavero." A person can give one barrel to the next person, and next to the next person, because no one's ever putting it down or picking it up and putting it down. But the implication is that it's b'shayara in, shelo b'shayara lo. You can't do that if you're in your regular village. When you just interpreted our Mishnah to be that Rabbi Yehuda permits you to carry, eat from a chavit lechavit, from adam to adam, even if you're not in a shayara. Elam Rav Yosef, you're right. We have to reinterpret our whole Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about a shayara. And so the whole Mishnah, back to the original question, how could you carry this barrel? The answer is because you're in a shayara. And when you're in a shayara, they canceled or they limited the rules of tchumim, and that's why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, at least, you're allowed to carry it. Abaya says, one second, there's a lot of details here, says Abaya. Let's get it straight. B'shayara, if you're in this, I forget how you translate shayara, caravan, right? If you're in this group, that's how I would translate it. Then afilu chavit shekanta shvita umayim shekanta shvita, you're allowed to pass from one person to another. So even if the barrel and the water were there when Shabbat started, the fact is that because you're in a shayara, you get the easier rule, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can pass it from one person to another, even though it's outside the tchum. If you're lo b'shayara, if you're in a regular situation where you're living near your village, then if the chavit is kanta shvita, umayim lo kanta shvita, then according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can do it as well. So both are true. Our Mishnah could be talking about not a shayara, and our Mishnah is talking about a situation where the water was flowing when Shabbat started, and so the water has no shvita, and that's why you can pass out the barrel with the water because the barrel is tafel, it's secondary and immaterial in compared to the water even on Shabbat. And the Braita Rabbi Yehuda said you could do it no matter what. We're talking about a shayara, and that was even if the water was konesh shvita. Rav Ashi says, I have a whole other explanation of the Mishnah. We're talking about a hefker chavit. Nobody owned this chavit when Shabbat started, right? Someone had abandoned this chavit, and mayim the hefker askinan, the water was hefker. So nobody cared about this barrel, and therefore there's no shvita. And therefore, if I want to now carry it beyond the tchum, remember, you're not allowed to carry it on Shabbat, but you can pass it from one person to another person in a situation where you need to do such a thing. And so then who argues with that, right? Remember, the Mishnah ended off, Amrulo, you can't do it, right? You have to go, and the words were actually quite extreme, right? The words were, Lo ta'alech zu yoter miraglei ba'aleha, right? More than the feet of its owner. So there's no owner, right? It says the Gemara, who is that? Man Amrulo, who is those who spoke back to him, to Rabbi Yehuda? That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. We had the opinion also, it's like a review of a lot of Eruvin. The Amar Chefze Hefker Konin Shvita. If you recall, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said that if there's no owner, then the object has its own ownership, and it's Konesh Shvita wherever it is. And so if it's Hefker, it's Konesh Shvita in its place. And what does it mean? My lo tahalech My lo tahalech zu yoter miragleha ba'alim, but there's no owners. What it means is lo yahalchu ein lo, these objects, this chavit should not be moved on Shabbat, yoter mikilim sheyesh lahem ba'alim, more than a kli that had an owner. And so it's true, this is Heftzei Hefker, it has no owner, but the fact is that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who is the arguing person in the Mishnah, Heftzei Hefker also have Shvita. You also limit these things to go 2,000 amot on Shabbat, and therefore you can't carry it from one person to another. Let's do the Mishnah, but we'll probably do it again tomorrow morning. Continues the Mishnah, the next.
Just a question.
Yes.
I mean, if you found like $1 million, you could do this trick with the pass it. I mean, that's what the implication is saying here.
So you're saying, why are you allowed to do this?
No,
As long as you put it inside a barrel that's ownerless.
no. If you just found like $1 million, it's ownerless. Okay, somebody dropped their suit out of a briefcase or something. You know, you could just, as long as you don't carry it, you can get it to your home.
I don't want to say yes, but I don't see why the answer would be no.
With the barrel, it's like, why are you carrying? Because it's worth money, right?
Correct. I'm not sure. I don't see anyone who's saying exactly what. Yes, the short answer is maybe, right? But again, you can't take it outside the tchum. Just to be very clear, right?
You're not carrying because you want the money, the value of it. You're carrying because you need the object, or the object can't be left
Right,
alone.
but I think the question is what's considered a need, right? So the Mishnah started talking about tefillin, which is there's a reason because it's a sacred object.
Right.
The question is a barrel is not presumably a sacred object, right? It's
Right.
not. So what's the limit? You know, when is this allowed and when is it not allowed? If your football went outside, right? Can you do that? You know, understand? Is there where do the Chachamim allow this and where do they not allow it? So I'm not sure what the cutoff is.
Seems to be a pressing need of this, especially when they mention the
Let
Shayra.
me look. I'm sure it's addressed, but I don't know the answer. Rashi does not say in the Mishnah, and I don't recall it in the Gemara, but it could be it's further in the Parak. But about where this is permitted. But it's a good question. Maybe David will find us an answer. Continues the Mishnah. Again, there's further Mishnayot are going to give more detail about this, but I don't recall a specific answer. The Mishnah has the next case. Hayat Korei b'Sefer. You're reading a book. Okay. Now we're assuming that that it's a holy book, a Jewish book, and it's made like a scroll. That's how all books were back in the day, right? They were all long scrolls like our Sifrei Torah. And you are ala skufa, where you're on your skufa usually means doorstep, right? You're in your doorway, and nitgalgela sefer miyado, and you drop part of it, right? And you drop it, it rolls away from you. So it rolls again. We don't know where it rolls, but let's say it rolls into Rosh Hashanah, maybe or whatever. It rolls out of your house. So what do? Says the Mishnah, go low at slow. You can then roll it back to you. You're still holding on to one end, right? You can roll it back up to bring it closer to you. Again, the Gemara is going to discuss where you are, where it is, what's the issue. Now, continues the Mishnah, let's say you're up on your roof, you're reading a sefer, right? You're reviewing your chumash, and of course, as you would expect, you drop one side of the sefer, and it rolls away from you off the roof, right? So, ad shelo higia lasarat tfachim, if it hasn't gone to within 10 tfachim of the ground, remember, Reshut HaYachid, we say it goes up to 10 tfachim, or any reshut, right? Goes up to 10 tfachim. If it hasn't got to within 10 tfachim of the ground, then you can be go low at slow. You can roll it back up towards yourself. However, the implication is, and the Mishnah says it, if the side that rolled down reaches 10 tfachim from the ground, you can't roll it back up. And so what do? Your Sefer Torah is down the side of your building, or your Sefer whatever. So it says the Mishnah, you should turn it over onto the writing, so that the writing is against the wall, so that if it rains or it's windy or it's storms or sunny, whatever, it won't ruin the writing, but you're not allowed to bring it back up on Shabbat. Okay? Well, again, we're going to discuss this all in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, if it's even one needle's width, one hair's breadth off the ground, then you can be going low at slow. You can roll it back up, the implication being that if it touches the ground, you can't roll it back up. Rabbi Shimon says, no, even if it's on the ground, go low at slow, you're allowed to roll it back up towards yourself. The whole prohibition of rolling this thing back up is only a shvut, Again, we'll discuss tomorrow what the shvut is. And they didn't prohibit anything in that category when you're talking about kitvei hakodesh, holy or kadosh writings, and therefore it's permitted even if it's touching the ground. Again, as long as you're holding on to the other end. And we will discuss, I think, starting tomorrow, what all of the issues are in this mission. Okay? Maybe David, do you have anything to enlighten us yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that this halakha of here's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Mutter lo la'adam la'akor chevet mershus harabim v'litno lechavero she'etzlo b'toch arba amosav. So you can hand off things that are something that you find in Rishus Harabim and give it to your friend that's near, next to you, within that. Obviously, you within 4 amos, so that you're not walking 4 amos with it. V'chavero lechavero she'etzlo afal pisha chavetz holek kama milin. Even though the object can end up traveling several mil b'Rishus Harabim. But you can't take it outside the tchum because we don't paskin. I gather that we're worried about the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's position. Shalo, meaning that it's not. It's an owner. It's an owned object.
Right.
Is the assumption. The yesh misha oser, and some people say that it's prohibited. That's all you got. It certainly seems like we end up, you would think that most people would be strict, but it's not even like clear from the Mishnah Berurah that, and of course everybody doesn't do this. It's actually funny that it doesn't come out so clearly, at least not right here. There are other places where it's discussed as well. But
if it was money, you'd run into a different prohibition of muksa.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
100%.
Correct. So I mean, it's not as if this is a mechanism for general violating of carrying along.
Wouldn't the barrel be muksa?
No, kalim are generally not muksa.
Yeah, no, I mean, remember, we had all the criteria. Okay, everyone. Shavua Tov. God willing, tomorrow morning, 7:30, right?
7:30.
Okay, we'll pick up.
And then this week we're gonna finish up one last week with 8:30, and next week, God willing, we'll go to 8:15 on Monday through Friday.
Okay, we should go.
Okay, bye.